Chris, welcome to another edition of the TEXO podcast channel. Been a busy period since we last spoke.
It has been.
I wanted to talk across a variety of topics, and one of the topics that I wanted to cover was something that we reviewed yesterday at the first rollout of the roadshow at Whittam, which I think went very well.
Yeah, I think it did. Nice to get a bit more feedback.
Well, that'll be on the...
James said it went very well, but he said there was going to go away and come back with some more sort of feedback. But
and James is the MD of DSI, so...
Division Director.
Okay. We're not, let's not elevate him too high.
No.
Too early.
No.
It's a long way to fall. So, what I wanted to just start to discuss was the changing business patterns post-COVID. What are the biggest changes that you've felt that have had to be instigated within a company, within a business structure, that COVID has created?
For me personally, I think the only thing that's really changed is staff.
So what's changed?
A lot's changed when it's come to the employees.
Okay.
I think it's like, as we sort of spoke about yesterday, I think it's definitely an employee's market. They do have a pick of whatever they want to do, wherever they want to go, So you have to be mindful of that. So we had to sort of really look at everything we sort of do as a business to try and attract staff and obviously offer them benefits that they could obviously get elsewhere, but try and do something over and above that, So we looked at hybrid working policy, sort of 3 days office, 2 days working from home. We've reduced hours, 40-hour week down to 37-hour week. Just done a few other sort of benefits on the sort of side of it, but I'd say they're the two main ones for me that sort of come from COVID.
But are they from COVID, or are they because there's an offshoot of the COVID pandemic was that there was a lot of people in the workforce that left the country? Yeah. So that there's it's not necessarily a COVID issue. It's a remnant of COVID because a lot of employees left, and you have less choice of a work pool. So you're dangling more carrots for them to retain them, to keep them, to get them to consider TEXO.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think it's just I blame COVID because you had no choice. You kind of had to work from home. You had to be remote and had to do meetings, everything on sort of Teams. So people become used to that. They become used to sort of being at home with their families every day of the week, choosing the time they sort of, not saying choosing the time they sort of started to sort of work, but you find more people were starting earlier in the morning. Do you know what I mean? So I think for me that's definitely a problem with COVID, and I think it's obviously made people sort of really stand up and kind of reevaluate their life. What's more important? Is it kind of getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, commuting to an office, staying late, coming home, or I can just work from home? Got the best of both worlds. I can do my job, plus I get quality time. So for me, I do think COVID is to kind of blame for that.
Necessity over personal comfort in reality, in the terms of you adapting your personality to those working environments. And I'll put that into context. When you were in your former company at Trad, people were up at 5, they were in at 6:30, they were in meetings and they left at 5. 5 days a week, sometimes 6 or 7, it depended what was. And that was the norm for over 30 years of your career. Yeah. And it still is because you get up.
Changed.
You personally.
No, that's what I'm saying. For me personally, that's not changed.
But then what my question was, the necessity over the personal comfort. You're sat in the office 5 days a week. You look around. There's not as many people in the office. There's a lot of empty seats. Do you think? How have you changed your mindset to? Are they working? Yeah. Is the productivity there?
Yeah, I think you have to change your mindset. You do. You do have to. I think we're quite fortunate. I think we're quite fortunate in TEXO that we've obviously got something. We've got something slightly different because we don't have many people work from home. as you know, we've got a massive problem when it comes to the sort of car parking, you know. So you really try and encourage people to start working from home to just give us a bit of breathing space. Yeah, we've sort of managed to sort of make room for some more sort of parking spaces, but if we can encourage more sort of hybrid working and we structure that properly, we won't have such an issue. But we find ourselves with these issues, and we always find ourselves with these major issues on a Monday. So to me, we're doing something right, because people don't seem to be want to work from home, you know. And it goes back to what me and you've sort of always spoke about, you know. Yes, I've always wanted to be in the office because it's the only way to build a team. You get used to each other. Like even going back to, as we sort of spoke about a minute ago, look at trad days. No one left. If there was someone there in that office that had work to finish,
it got finished.
No one would ever leave. We'd all work together to make sure that was done so we could all go home. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of just in your DNA of how you sort of work now. So I find that sort of, again, there's a lot of people that sort of do come in office. A lot of people that still will do the hours that I do. Some do over and above it sort of TEXO. So it doesn't worry me. And I don't ever look around and look at the time and see people walking out the door at 4 o'clock and where they going. Them days are gone. You've got to adjust. You've got to adjust, you know. And all I can, for me personally, you base it down to sort of results. You know, if you're getting results and things are getting done, does it really matter?
But how comfortable have you been in that transition? Has it been actually something that you've easily adjusted to?
I think I had no choice. You know, I think that's what I'm saying. Coming away from sort of trad, and being in that kind of that working environment. And when I turned up to sort of DSI, sort of 4 months after I left trad, that was completely, because I'd had a bit of time off and my mind was going completely crazy. You know, so when I actually got back into an office environment, I was worse than I was at trad. And I instilled that into the guys at DSI, and they must have thought, what's going on here? It was crazy. Because
I remember having a conversation with you, waking up a couple of days after you had finished your jail sentence.
I left on a Friday, on the Monday.
And you sat at the end of the bed.
Yeah.
And you thought to yourself,
what now? I actually thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown.
What am I going to do? I have no purpose.
Where's my
special purpose?
I had no phone, and I had no computer. I had to hand it all in on a Friday. So to wake up on Monday morning with no phone calls, no issues, no problems.
That's a lovely thing.
It's not, you know, but when you're so programmed into it, it's really not nice. It's not nice. Because I had no purpose, exactly what you just said. There's only so many times.
But it's that programming, isn't it? That's really what I'm trying to extract here, is that programming, and you were explaining about Whittam, how to deprogram.
Yeah, but what I'm more going back to is, I kind of went on a bit of a crusade when I sort of returned back to work after a few months, you know, because it was still instilled in me. And the guys felt the brunt of that. The guys really had to kind of live and breathe that kind of mentality, you know. And at that time, I still thought that was normal behaviour. But then when you jump forward 6 months after that, when sort of I took over.
But it was normal behaviour. It was how companies function.
You know, there's a lot of companies out there that sort of, even before COVID,
there was very few companies, if many, that had a true hybrid mentality.
I don't mean hybrid mentality. I just mean it wasn't so kind of time driven. Like if someone come in the office after 7 o'clock in the morning, that was deemed as being late. And if you left before 5 o'clock at night, you was deemed of having a half day. You know, that's the mentality. You know, so it's not right. So there's a lot of companies it's not like that. But what I'm going back to is, so I kind of really come into sort of DSI, and it must have blown their minds. Because they didn't have that sort of DSI before I sort of come. But then jump forward, you know, to December 2019 when I sort of stepped into sort of group itself. There was so much work that needed to be done, and I was obviously there. I was there constantly. So where did it go at night? You know, you might just stay in the office. So you was in there early, you was in there late, because you had so much to do. But then 3 months after that, COVID hit. So what do? You know? You can't be in the office early. You can't be in the office till late. Your whole life just sort of changed overnight. But I never worked from home one day.
No.
During the whole 2 years, I put myself in the office in DSI. I was still in there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I still in there at 6 o'clock at night. You know.
So nothing. That's what you were programmed.
That's what I was programmed. You know. So what I'm saying is, but I still had to have that structure of getting up, going into an office. working my normal hours. You know, it was always sort of programmed, but that was me. But I started to really relax when it comes to the staff around me, because there's only so many Teams meetings you can have during the day, only so many phone calls. How do you know? How do you know what they're doing? How do you know if they're in the office early? How do you know they're in the office late?
Do you think?
So you have to automatically just start to just trust.
But do you think your teams felt that trust was there?
Probably not at the beginning. No, definitely not. And I didn't really have that trust, you know, because I didn't know everyone. And as we know, there was a lot of people there that kind of.
There was lots of changes.
Lots of changes, you know, needed to be sort of looked at. So you had to learn to trust that they was doing the best for TEXO, and until they sort of prove you right or wrong. And I still have not changed to this day. That's what I'm saying, you know. It's just how I'm programmed. But I never insist on that kind of working life to anyone. I had even had a conversation with sort of James yesterday. You know, he's busy, he's stressed, he's sort of working long hours, he's got young kids. I don't want him to be stressed. I don't want him to be working late. You know, I want him to be at home with his children at night. That's a complete different mindset now. You know, before it'd be like, well, I've got kids, I don't see them. Do you know? But now you're different. Now you're completely different in approaching people. And if I feel that James is working late, and I'm not just saying James, there's probably quite a few of them, but working late at night, not seeing his kids, I'm doing something wrong. There's something fundamentally wrong I'm doing that means he can't leave the office at a normal reasonable hour and go and see his kids.
But
so
people
you start to feel guilty.
I don't necessarily think guilt is the right adjective really for it. It's more the fact that life instills or has pressures that unless you spend a certain amount of time on something, you just cannot achieve it. It either takes too long, and that's more of an issue with business in general rather than the individual and the human aspect. So, you know, the interesting thing that I want to sort of discuss a bit more is that people are very quick to forget. COVID came, COVID's gone, well, let's just forget it. But
you can't forget it.
Well,
because we still live with it.
What are from a business perspective, rather than just to say a staff perspective, what are the legacies of that period that have taught you the most in terms of business?
Business still continues.
Now, have there been any changes, sort of pre and post, that stand out for you?
No, I would say the only really change.
But isn't that weird? You just think everybody went through that complete change, and then let's just get back to normal. Let's not learn from some of those things.
Well, you can't. Of course, you have to. It goes back to what we spoke about when it comes to the staff. You had to learn to sort of what your staff needed over and above what your needs were. So you had to. That's something you had to learn, and that's something I still feel is a kind of legacy that will continue for the rest of our lives now. That's not going to change.
So do you think it's affected people more than actually business, as in the model of consumerism or
yeah? I mean, listen, I can only talk of my business. You know, that's all I can talk about, because you look at, as we all know, when you look at sort of hospitality and sort of
holidays,
airports, holidays, all that kind of stuff. You know, that's completely changed. And that would probably still take a long time to sort of recover from it, but I think we're kind of fortunate enough.
But has it changed? Has it actually changed? Because
again, it goes back to what you said to me a minute ago. No, but when you say back to normal, you look at how much staff lost their jobs during that, you know, and they've had to sort of leave the hospitality sector and go into another sector. So can they just attract all these staff back into the hospitality sector? Probably not, you know. So I think that's where things have sort of changed. And like you sort of said, people have had to go back to their own countries, and they've sort of stayed there, and they've obviously found work there. They don't want to come back, you know. So I think certain things are definitely changed in certain sort of industry sectors, but I think we're fortunate enough that what we work in, I don't see much change apart from, as we sort of been speaking about, is that sort of stuff.
So this will be an interesting discussion. COVID obviously exposed weaknesses within companies, and the weaker ones disappeared.
Yeah.
And the ones that were potentially more agile, more dynamic, some of those, they were the ones that survived. Because there's less, potentially there are less companies on the market or in the market, has it been easier after COVID
for
winning business?
winning business?
Do you think it could have influenced things?
Not really. Not from what I've sort of seen. Yeah, if maybe look at sort of fabrication, I think there was a lot of fabrication companies sort of suffered during sort of COVID, and some of them are no longer here. But there's still enough fabrication businesses out there to mop up that. So it's not like we're now just kind of, there's only textile fabrication left. Lovely world to be in, but there's not. So I just think there's certain elements of the business that sort of, you're always going to have challenges, always going to have competitors, no matter what happens in the world. Whatever changes, one goes under tonight, another one will pop up. You're always going to have that. So I don't think much has changed as in that.
What are the sort of swing into the need for, we discussed it briefly yesterday in the roadshow, frameworks, and about the stability of an organisation, and in one respect how frameworks can be overlooked in terms of long-term agreements, how they can be overlooked in terms of creating a stability and a stable platform for a company actually to take a pause, take a breath, step back, and then actually look at the landscape. Is that fair, do you think, a description of really what a framework can achieve for a company?
And you've got to remember, even going back to sort of my trade days, we never had frameworks. We were built on kind of repeat business, 90% repeat business. But you can't build your kind of your budget on that. We know how many guys we've got, and we know what we need to turn over to keep them guys employed, and what's going to turn the lights on a daily basis. So we had to fight tooth and nail to make sure that we hit that budget by the end of the year. But I could never plan a year out. I know what my end had to be. How I got there was just a wet finger in the air. And I think moving into sort of TEXO, you start to sort of realise that there's such a thing out there as MSAs and framework agreements, and your life sort of changes. You think, wait a minute, if we can get 3, 5 years, 8-year frameworks under our belt, we know what we're going to have on a month-by-month basis. We know that's a starter when it comes to sort of building a budget. We know exactly how many staff we're going to need to fill that contract. So life changes, life becomes easy, but you've got to get that framework. You've got to get the framework first. it all sounds...
And then you have to service it correctly.
It all sounds like a beautiful meadow.
Yes.
Lovely sunshine.
Look at that green grass on the other side.
You've actually got to get yourself to that table to be in bidding for these frameworks. And that was obviously going back to, where we was as a sort of company when I took over. The kind of...
Inherited issues
are sitting around sort of TEXO, We weren't at that table. We'd hear about these frameworks, and we'd hear that one of our competitors have just gone on a 5-year framework, and we'd all just sit around a table thinking, why don't we know about that? Why do we know about that? Yeah, and that was my argument. I always say to the guys, I don't mind if we lose it, but why do we not even know about it? We need to know. We need to be able to get to the point where we're actually tendering for these projects. And if we lose it, we lose it. But at least we're sitting at the table with the big boys.
So what's been the change then?
I just think it's just been sheer determination and hard work, We've managed to sort of pull ourselves out from where we were, getting in front of these customers, starting to win work, build trust. But these are the customers we're targeting just to win projects from that do have in their back pocket a framework. So the more trust we can build with them, they start to understand us as a company, we understand them as a company, then these frameworks come out. Then we can start to bid. And yeah, we've not won all of them, of course we haven't. But we've always been there or thereabouts.
So that's the change you've been now, you've got to be in it.
We've been invited in.
You've been invited into that club.
The top table. So now, but when you look at TEXO overall, the guys have had a KPI probably from day dot, of certain parts of the business can win frameworks, certain parts of the business can't, But the ones who are able to sort of secure frameworks in that service or that market sector, they're tasked with trying to win 2 a year. That's difficult. Some have achieved it, but it always gives us that drive and that determination to kind of really get a lot of frameworks under our belt. And we're managing to pick that up in different different sectors.
Which is the one that that has been most successful? And obviously there's so many, because it might be an easier environment to win them in the first place.
I'd say for me it's been asset integrity.
With the utilities.
Yes, but you've got utilities, but don't forget as well, everyone needs inspections, you know. That's never going to change. Things need to be inspected, things need to be sort of repaired, you know. There's always maintained. There's always going to be need for that, and I suppose, especially when you look at sort of oil and gas industry, you know, we touched on it yesterday, but
which I want to touch on.
But then you've got obviously like the sort of the nothing's going anywhere at the moment. There's so much money to decommission things, you know. So trying to extend the life of them, and that's where we come into play. You know, this is where we can kind of get in there and repair and try and keep things sort of going. So for me, I think asset integrity have won a lot of frameworks, continuing to win a lot of frameworks, and I think really that's where the sort of frameworks will sort of sit. You then look on top of that, DSI. DSI is starting to win frameworks in sort of utilities and all the overhead power lines, all this kind of stuff. But once you can get one under your belt of doing overhead power line inspection, why can't you get another one? Because if you won that one, why can't you win this one? You know, so it's just transferring into it. So I think once you start to get these frameworks and you've got that pedigree, the rest just come, hopefully, not following, of course I don't, but you start to then at least know about other ones coming up, starting to get to the table again, starting to tender for them, because you've got a case study, we've got history, and that's really where we've had to build our own history. There's no history from TEXO prior to 6 years, so really we've had to build our own history as we go along.
You mentioned asset integrity and DSI being the sort of the beneficiaries of the early stages of the LTAs and the frameworks. What's the hardest area of the business to break into that?
So you got engineering and fabrication. You know, that's always difficult. You know, because that has always been sort of project led. Yes, they've sort of picked up repair orders for sort of for BP, and there's obviously a lot of repair orders out there. You know, but that's really where the sort of it's more the engineering. More the engineering could pick up frameworks. They could get MSAs. They've got MSAs and they've got sort of frameworks with sort of the repair orders, and they could get more. But it's sort of engineering based. I think when you look at fabrication, that's very difficult. That is purely going to be project led. The project's going to come in. You're going to do that project, send it back out. Who's going to want a 5-year framework with manufacturing or producing stuff? I can't see that ever happening. You know, if you get a big order in of, take orbital for instance, you know, if there was 8 orbitals, then fantastic. That's sort of a framework because you know you've got 8 of them to build over 8 years, whatever it may be, you know. So, but fabrication definitely for me is always going to be that tricky one when it comes to sort of having longevity of work and kind of looking out in front. And obviously going back to sort of workspace solutions as well. That's always going to be difficult. But we're fortunate enough that we've got a person like Richard sitting there that's so customer focused. He won't even mention a job. A job will come in today, even just someone sniffing about a project. And before you know it, he's won that, you know. So that's what his forte is unbelievable when it comes to sort of that. And it's only because of how he sort of is with the customers, what he produces at the end of it is what gives him repeat business.
So this is Rich. We're talking about Richard Lamb from Workspace, the director of Workspace.
So it's just works. It's just literally work just keeps coming in, but it is literally projects. But we're just fortunate enough that they keep coming. Yeah. So it's lovely to be able to get to the point. I mean, there's an opportunity. Really, the only opportunity I suppose for Richard would be if we if we added a rental into Richard's portfolio. There's a lot of risk that come involved. But you know yourself, look at sort of back in the scaffolding days, you know, going into the hire and sales market, very lucrative. It can obviously backfire on you quite dramatically, but it is a model that we understand and we've been used to. So could it be done again? Yeah, it could be. And I think really if that's what we sort of looked at with Richard, adding that, keep what he does, because you could never change what he does, but bolting on kind of a rental sort of model as well. It could just balance it. It could just kind of keep the wolves from the door.
So is it true that you're trying to clone Richard at this present moment? Sort of like
in certain aspects. No, I think as we even when we sort of spoke about yesterday, you know, when the day I walked into.
You let it out. You let the wolf out the bag in a way because you just said that it was
favourite
my issue because I asked who's your favourite and you panicked.
I didn't panic. But no, I think for me, coming from sort of my background with sort of trad, what made us unique, even in the scaffolding industry, was the fact that we were so diverse. Our eggs were never in one basket. We worked in many different sort of multiple sectors, and we worked for multiple clients. So if that client went quiet or something happened to that client, the wheels won't fall off because we've got plenty more clients and we've got plenty more. If new build stopped overnight,
or if COVID hit,
yeah, we could just
there were no sectors or services.
We can continue all these different services. So that's what I think made us a little bit different to most sort of scaffolding companies. But that was obviously instilled in me, and that was my mindset. So obviously coming into sort of TEXO straight away, I want different sort of sectors, different sort of markets because that's what I'm used to sort of doing. So when you come in, and again like we spoke yesterday, completely 95% oil and gas business, sitting in Aberdeen. And you've then got Richard that has come from a construction background. So a completely different mindset straight away. And then when you look at what he was building, yourself, well, if they need it in construction, they're going to need that everywhere. And that's what is the beauty for me with Richard, even at the beginning. It was a product that can be made for any size, anything you want.
It was diverse,
and it's so diverse.
But it brings me onto my next point, which is talking about the success of diversification. So 12 months, probably not quite 12 months when we spoke last and did our last podcast.
2 years, I think.
And
my sister only heard it the other day.
Did she?
Yeah, said how good it was.
Well, you've mentioned it before, how much your family care.
You can leave that in. You said let me know
as long as the money's coming in, that's all that matters.
If we put this one out in sort of 2026, you won't listen to it.
I'll send it to Jackie, don't worry, I'll give her the link.
Thank you.
One of the most fascinating things is when we first met and we started looking at the communications journey.
Yep.
And it was really about making sure that as many clients understood that we weren't sector dependent.
Yep.
If we looked at, say, 12 months later, how difficult has that journey been, and have we succeeded on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's finally, the penny's dropped. The penny's dropped within TEXO that there is more to life than oil and gas. It is so volatile. We all don't know what's going to happen at the end of it. Is it the tap going to turn off? I can't see it myself personally, but it will hopefully always be there. But is it enough to have a business solely in that sort of market sector with the what's the word I'm sort of looking for? The volatility of it, So you can't really rely on that, So everyone now understands that there was a method to my madness. We're kind of coming in with different sort of market sectors, but I've always wanted that sort of end goal of 5 sort of market sectors, 20% in each market sector. That's the dream of where we want TEXO to get to one day. But it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very difficult because of some services we offer can't be that diverse. They can't really work in the 5. They could work in 2. They could work in 3. So you're never going to be able to get them all firing all cylinders in all the market sectors you want to. So you do have to adapt. That say engineering could be 50% reliant on oil and gas because that's just more their market, and then the rest can be kind of made up with other sort of markets they can work in. Whereas you look at Richard could literally be 20% in all the markets. DSI could be, asset integrity could be, So I think it's really sort of looking at the business overall, and if there's certain parts that might be more reliant on one market sector, then we kind of have to understand that. But do you just really be careful that we don't get too caught up in it because overnight, yourself, that can just drop away.
But it's interesting that the five areas, the 20% split across it, and you look at sort of engineering fabrication with the 2 ports with Blythe and Dundee, with the amount of renewables that are going through there, there is enough renewable. There are enough renewable projects out there to completely rewrite the rule book for engineering fabrication.
You say that, but it's difficult.
But is it difficult is it difficult? They are there, the projects are massive, but are they there for the English company?
No. Well, Of course they're there. I mean, you can obviously price.
But the competition is so fierce with the Chinese.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and as well, what you need to remember is there's not many companies based in the north of England that have got a big enough facility to take some of these renewables projects. They're massive. There's a few, but we're not fortunately one of them, you know. So,
but it's
unfortunately,
part of that supply chain, or is it just?
Yeah, but so
it just doesn't work like that.
If it's going to come to the UK and they're kind of big fabrications in renewables, if they're going to come to the UK, they can only really go to sort of 2 or 3 competitors that we know of, you know. So, where else do they go? They have to go to China or they have to go to sort of Europe. You know, that's really how it is. So yeah, the work's out there, but we're never going to be one of them people. Us, we're never going to be these big fabrications. You know, of course we can do a fabrication. We can do a big fabrication, but we are limited for sort of space. You know, so we would much rather be that kind of company that you're going to build that. Okay, we can do all your small fabrications around it. That's what we do.
So that brings me actually sort of neatly onto it. Is the profitability. It's always lovely to get one of these massive projects that's 20, 30, 40 million.
You know.
But and I, as you know, I read a lot. I'm a good observer on things and only comment when I'm asked to. And you see these big projects coming in and the headaches they cause. Yes. So is it, you know,
there's no margin for error.
Exactly, because your profit margin disappears overnight.
Would I rather £1 million projects, or would I rather 10 £100,000 pound projects? Give me the 10 all day long.
Yeah,
easy to manage. You know, your risk is less. You can get them out the door quicker. You can get paid quicker. You know, so for me, you'd much rather that every day of the week.
So over the last 12 months, because I know there's been a couple of very large projects that have been within the fabrication sector, would you, in 12 months' time, think actually we don't want that type of risk, we're going to not go down that route, we're going to go where our comfort factor is, and it's the smaller niche projects that are going to be where the success and the expansion will be?
Listen, in an ideal world, yes, but we're not there as a company. You know, as we sort of spoke about, you know, we're 6 years old. Yes, we've done very well in 6 years. Completely different company overnight. People do sort of take us seriously. People do know that we do a good job for them, but that's in sort of certain areas when it comes to the sort of fabrication part. Yes, the ideal world. I know Bruce would back me up all day long. You know, much rather do smaller fabrications all day, but needs must. The bills have got to be paid. The lights have got to be put on. You know, staff have got to be kept in employment. So if that means we have to take a big project on, we have to take it on. You know, obviously it all depends on risk. Whether we end up kind of losing money on it, that's always a factor we look at. But as we go back to it, you know, one mess up on a big project, and that could have such a detrimental effect on a whole business, you know. So, but when beggars can't be choosers.
So, with that in mind, the expansion that's happened, and we've touched on this briefly, but there's been a sizable shift from loss to gain, to profit, which isn't by accident. It's been extremely well structured and well planned. I don't believe in luck in business.
Finger in the air.
Finger in the air.
Good wind.
Getting your finger taken off. Is that sustainable?
That's obviously the next problem, you know, because you know you look at sort of TEXO from the start. You know, it needed a lot of funding. Definitely needed funding. You know, from sort of just from building a sort of a business, rebuilding a business after a sort of a year and a half. You know, rebuilding it back up again. It needed funding, and then on top of that, you hit COVID. Work's not out there, you know, so we had to be funded all the way sort of through it. So funding losses, that's sad. You know, you don't mind funding if it's for this and that, but when you're funding just sort of losses, it's difficult to swallow. But we always sort of stuck by it. We always knew it was kind of something good about it, and we needed to kind of just continue. And then when you do start to hit these dizzy heights of turning profit, that comes with another headache, because then you're funding growth, which is always what you want, but not when you've funded losses. You know, so now we're in that position where we're transitioning into that kind of a bigger company. Don't want it to get too sort of big, but you need the staff in there. We need some capex. We need to buy this, buy that. You know, different market sectors require different sort of machinery, whatever it may be. You know, so you're now back investing into it, and more money's going in, and that's really the headache. It's a constant headache, and it's got to be sustainable now. You know, we are in that position. Fortunately enough now, the funding's completely stopped. There's no need for more than that. We're turning our own, sort of steering our own ship, but that's got to be continued. Now we're starting to turn profit. Now you find yourself you become very greedy, because if you come to a month and you haven't made as much profit as you hoped you made, then you start getting up. It just turns. Your mindset completely changes, you know, and that's where we are. We're fortunate enough that we've really gone through a hard time. We're through that, you know. We're now sort of steering our own ship, profit being made on a monthly basis. You know, it's fantastic to sort of see, but that has to continue. We can't afford to have any issues that are going to affect us turning profit.
Because that again brings me into the fact of that the crystal ball in business is no longer there. It's a little dimmer than it used to be maybe 10, 15 years ago. And market factors are there. The Ukraine war still happening. You've got American politics, you've got UK politics. Do you see any external factors that can scuttle that ship?
There's always going to be something, always, but as long as you're diverse enough, you'll cope, you'll manage, you'll get through it. You know, as long as you haven't got your eggs in too many one baskets, you'll get through anything, you know. And I think that's the unfortunate part for us, you know, as I sort of said from the outset, taking over 3 months in, COVID hit in a company that were 95% reliant on oil and gas. The oil and gas market come to a sort of a bit of a standstill, and then on top of that, the oil price crashed. Two things happened, you know, you couldn't believe it. So where's that work going to come from? We haven't got that established name, we haven't got frameworks. Projects are not coming easily accessible.
It's a perfect storm.
It doesn't take a rocket scientist to know you're in trouble, you know. But looking back on that, when you look at sort of DSI, because we had time in DSI to sort of start to build and start to really sort of shape that before I sort of moved into sort of group, we did at least manage to get into different sectors, albeit smaller and albeit sort of a slower pace, but we managed to get into construction. And that helped us during COVID because, you know, construction never really stopped.
It was one of the sectors that got a lifeline.
Yeah.
That it was an essential deliverable that had to carry on.
Yeah, and that's why DSI were fortunate enough we had work in construction, so we could continue to work in construction. You know, if we were still in sort of sitting in your nuclear, different story. You know, but because we had that. But when you look at TEXO and a wider group, there wasn't much of construction going on. Yes, Richard had his modulars, but again, going back to that, hasn't got frameworks. So who's going to want to go and build a new school when it's COVID? Kids can't go.
There were no kids in school.
So you look on it, the whole thing was an absolute perfect storm. Yeah. And 2 years of pain, absolute pain to get through that, you know.